My sister borrowed my wedding dress to try on, then stole my groom and said I do at my ceremony. I found my sister in my wedding dress 2 nights before the ceremony. She said she was just trying it on. My stomach went cold. My fiancé had been acting weird for weeks. He canceled plans, got sudden late meetings, and left his phone face down. I told myself it was nerves. The night she borrowed the dress, I left it hanging in my closet, zipped, with the veil tucked inside. She asked for the dress alone, said she wanted to see how it fit. I told her no at first, then let her because she was family. I should have been firmer. She came back 2 hours later laughing, hair a mess, cheeks flushed. She left the dress smelling faintly of smoke and cheap perfume. The next day, my fiancé said he needed to run to the shop for a last-minute errand and left his suit at the cleaners. He kissed me at the door and said he'd be back soon. He did not come back for the rehearsal. The rehearsal went ahead with his seat empty and his name on a place card. People whispered. My sister acted like everything was normal. That night, I searched his messages. There were threads where he and my sister planned weekends, hotels, and excuses. I took screenshots. The messages were explicit, dated, and practical. They were not a one-night mistake. My heart hammered so hard I had trouble breathing. I brought the screenshots to my best friend and she said I had to confront him. I called him and his voicemail was full. Then his mother knocked on my door. She told me he had gone to pack at my parents' house and would come by to talk. When he arrived, he looked tired and apologetic in a way that felt rehearsed. I showed him the messages on my phone. He didn't deny it. He said he loved me and that he made a mistake. He said he wasn't sure how it happened. My sister had been living rent-free in my guest room for months, a temporary fix after losing her job. She had keys and access and help from me for savings and job hunting. She called herself stuck and I helped. I had no idea the help came with strings. My fiancé said he would end it. He promised he would call my sister and tell her it was over. I believed him for 3 hours. Then I got a text from my sister saying she needed to talk to him in person before it was over. He left the house again. The messages on my phone were suicide level obvious, but my family told me to trust him. My sister called her husband. No, wait, she wasn't married. Scratch that. My sister called our mother and said she and my fiancé were in love, that it wasn't my fault. The night before the wedding, I found a receipt in the trash beneath her suitcase. 2 nights at a hotel on the same weekend she'd said she spent at her friend's. The hotel charged to a card I'd helped her open. I felt like I was underwater. I confronted her in the guest room with the receipt and the messages. She smiled in a way that wasn't a smile and said she loved him. She said he loved her back. She said being in love was messy and complicated. She called me naive and said I should let people be happy. I left trembling and packed a small bag. My mother called the next morning and begged me to go to the wedding. She said the family was counting on the public face of this celebration. She said it would ruin everything if I didn't show. She also said people would talk forever if I walked out now. I walked into the church and people clapped. My sister sat in the front row and looked like she belonged there. I walked to the altar and my fiancé avoided my eyes. The officiant asked my fiancé if he took me to be his lawfully wedded wife. He said yes, and his voice cracked in a way that felt like betrayal. Then my sister stood up, walked down the aisle, and sat beside him. She put her hand on his knee. He looked at her and squeezed back. The priest stuttered, confused. People started whispering, phones out. My sister reached over, took his hand, and said she wanted to say something. She stood, stepped forward, and put my bridal veil over her head. The groom stood, took her hand, and the priest asked them both if they intended to be joined in marriage. He said yes. My chest dropped. I remember the sound of my own breath feeling like a loud, foreign noise. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. Everyone stared. My father stood up, his face red and stunned. My mother began crying so loudly she had to be led out by cousins. My bridesmaids grabbed my hands and I left the front of the church because I couldn't stand watching it. I stumbled into the side room where the reception caterers kept trays and water. My best friend slid my phone into my hand and pointed at a new stream of photos. There were pictures of my sister and my fiancé the night before, taken in low light, in a hotel room. One photo had my veil in the corner of the frame. They were smiling and holding hands over a bottle of champagne. I called my fiancé and he picked up immediately. He told me they had been in love for months. He said he couldn't go through with the day because he realized he belonged with my sister. He said he wanted to marry her now. He begged me not to make a scene. I hung up and walked back into the sanctuary, where our guests were still in shock. I climbed onto the stage where musicians were packing up and held the microphone. I told the room that I had screenshots and receipts. I said I had hotel charges and messages. I told them the truth about the rent-free guest room and the favors I'd done. People looked at their phones and then back at me. My sister bolted from the front pew and shoved past the organist. She lunged at me and grabbed the veil from my head. She ripped the veil into 2 pieces with her bare hands. Her fingernails left tiny crescents of blood on my scalp. Security pulled her away, but she yelled about love and destiny and how I didn't understand. It turned into a brawl at the altar. Some relatives tried to intervene. Others filmed everything. My mother fainted and had to be let out by EMTs. My father left before the reception even started. My fiancé stood at the back with his sister in his arm. He kept repeating that he loved her, as if repeating it enough times would make it right. After the church emptied, I sat in my car and called my lawyer. He told me to preserve evidence and not to sign anything. He told me there could be fraud if they took my property or money or if they tried to claim the marriage had been valid. He told me to breathe and come to his office. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with messages from guests asking what happened. Texts were public within minutes. Screenshots of the hotel pics were everywhere. The local news called the next morning after a guest uploaded a video that went viral. I slept a few hours and then got a call from the county clerk. Someone at the reception had rushed down to the courthouse and tried to file a marriage license for my sister and my ex that night. The clerk refused because the paperwork wasn't correct, but the attempt was recorded on camera. The county confirmed no marriage certificate had been issued. The relief lasted maybe an hour. Then my mother called and begged me to be reasonable, to meet for dinner and talk about how we could keep the family intact. Her voice cracked and she said I needed to compromise. She said I was young and he was a good match for the family and that my sister had been lonely. I told her no and then hung up. She texted my grandmother, who sent me a photo of the cake she had ordered that now sat untouched at her bakery. Grandma asked me to forgive for the sake of family. I went to the bakery and stared at a 3-tier round cake with my name on the side and small sugar letters. I picked out a piece and left without paying. I felt like I had to remove anything that tied me to that day. A week later, my fiancé called and said he wanted to talk. He said he wanted to explain. He said he had felt trapped and then found someone who made him feel free. I read the recorded messages he had sent my sister the night before the wedding, messages he thought he could delete. They were full of calculations about timing, plans for the altar, and how to manage his parents. He had intended to create a story that painted me as the one who walked away. He had practiced a narrative. My sister had been part of the plot. She had rehearsed how to act shocked in front of our family. My friend found receipts showing my sister bought my veil on impulse 2 days after my dress alteration. She had the dress altered in secret. She had been photographing herself in it and sending pictures to my fiancé. She planned everything while I trusted her with vendors and RSVPs. My brother came to my apartment and put his hands on my shoulders. He said he had no idea, he wished he had seen it sooner, and he promised to help me through the fallout. My mother ate in the kitchen and didn't talk. At the first family meeting since the ceremony, my sister smiled and said she was sorry if I'd been hurt. Her sorry was short and tactical. My cousin texted me privately and said my sister had been telling different versions of the story depending on who she spoke to. To my aunt, she said we had problems and she stepped in. To a friend, she said we'd already been separated for months. I realized my sister had been scripting an alternate reality for months, lining people up to believe her version when the reveal came. I kept finding new receipts. There were florist invoices in her name that matched arrangements at the reception. There were charges to her credit card at a hotel chain across town the same weekend my fiancé was working late. There were messages where she coached him on how to break it to my parents. She had been building an exit strategy. I hired a private investigator because I couldn't keep living with the question of whether my life had been a lie. The investigator found more: hotel key logs, parking receipts, a chain of emails with subject lines like plan, now, after. He gave me a thick folder and said this was enough to prove intent if I needed to use it. I felt small and enormous at the same time. Small because people could do this to you. Enormous because I had evidence. I could choose what to do with it. I chose to be quieter than people expected. I didn't go on TV. I didn't storm into my sister's workplace. I planned instead. I kept photos, receipts, messages, and hotel logs in a safe deposit box. I called vendors and asked for contracts and email chains that showed who paid what. I changed passwords on shared accounts and removed my sister's access to family calendars. 3 months later, the local news still ran the viral clips sometimes, usually when a talk show needed a hot headline. My sister moved out of my parents' house and into an apartment paid for by a family loan, with strict terms. She lost most of the sympathy she'd briefly been handed. She tried to file a civil suit claiming emotional distress and that I had defamed her with messages shared online. My lawyer smiled without any warmth and told her lawyer to bring it on. We had the hotel receipts and the key logs and the messages. They settled quickly after their lawyer realized his client had planned and executed a scheme. Part of the settlement required my sister to reimburse certain expenses and to cease contacting me. She signed a document that said she would stay away from me and my events and would pay damages for emotional distress. For a while she obeyed. Then she started showing up at family events from a distance, eyes fixed on me like a test. I stood my ground. I blocked her on every platform and asked my parents to respect my boundaries. It was messy. There were nights I replayed video clips and text threads in my head and wanted to burn everything. Then there were days I could look at wedding photos from my childhood and feel nothing but blank frost. Months later, I sold the wedding dress at a consignment shop anonymously. I took the rest of the money and invested it. I donated some to a shelter and kept the rest in a high-interest account. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. She taught me how to name what happened and how to reclaim agency. She asked me to write down one small thing each day that was mine and only mine. I started with tiny things: what I cooked for dinner, a walk route, a book I finished. 2 years later, I got engaged again, quietly, to someone who met me online and never met my family before proposing. We kept our ceremony small and private. My sister's name was not on any list. My parents were invited, but only after they promised to respect boundaries. The day of the small wedding, I walked down a path I'd paved myself. I married someone who had no copy of my past and no access to my inbox. I kept a copy of the old evidence locked in a file at my attorney's office, in case people told me I was vindictive for holding on to it. They didn't know that remembering is safety when trust has been broken. My sister reached out once after that wedding to apologize without asking for anything. She said she was sorry and that she had been selfish. I read the message, saved it in a folder where it couldn't bother me, and then deleted it. My family forgave her slowly and awkwardly. They also forgave themselves for missing what was in front of them. I forgave them for their apologies, not because they deserved it, but because I wanted to move without hauling anger around like a suitcase. I moved into a house with a porch and a yard and painted the bedroom a color I liked. I kept the old cake topper my grandmother had bought and put it in a box that sat on the top shelf of my closet, a reminder that some pieces from that day were mine to keep. Sometimes I replay the moment my sister pulled my veil. Sometimes I still feel raw. Most days I do not. I still don't know how to feel about any of it, but at least the truth is out.